Hello friends, I've made this fun little render in Houdini, messing around kind of for the first time seriously with some really fun rendering techniques in SOPs, just using the viewport, and I figured this would be a cool file to share, and I also figured I would just make a really quick little video going through sort of a little bit of how it works. So let's jump in and check it out. So this is our new friend Porty. And what you'll see that's kind of interesting is he's actually just a grid of particles with color and p-scale for each of them. And the way that I'm doing this is basically projecting this stuff through the camera plane onto the geometry and then snapping it back to the camera plane so that it's all nice and even, so that like the scale of the points won't kind of change depending on like the distance from the camera in terms of like how big they look when they're rendered. And I'm just rendering them flat, but yeah, I made this whole fun setup with a couple different kind of render modes. This one's mainly just changing the color of the particles and they're all the same size. This one is just changing the size of the particles, the p-scale, and this one's kind of doing both. There's some other fun controls in here, like playing with how much I'm kind of blurring or creating fake GI, I'm calling it. Yeah, so that's kind of the core of the render setup. I'll explain this all a bit more, but this was loosely inspired by this really awesome talk that Mark Fancher did for Side Effects a few years ago. Motion design hacks. Basically builds kind of a similar setup to this, where he's projecting points to render the geometry in the viewport and blocking it out using a trick that I pretty much just took from him and adapted slightly. So I did a pretty similar thing. Let's kind of take a look back at the beginning. So I did my normal kind of character setup, you can see here. And you can see I have the same camera. So I just kind of created the scene normally the way that I would. You know, I have my fun little KineFX rigging setup, and you can watch my KineFX rigging videos if you want to get more of a sense for how I'm setting this stuff up. And the way that I'm setting this stuff up, I'm using my own custom jiggler HDA, so you guys should all have access to that on the Patreon anyway. There's like the basic character setup, all that stuff. Nothing super exciting here. The fun starts once I kind of set up the actual scene up here, where we just bring in Porty, our character. And what I did was I made this kind of ground function as basically the ground, but I also kind of made it function as sort of the penumbra of my spotlight. So I scattered a bunch of points onto it, which we won't be able to see in this viewport mode, but if I switch it to render points as points, you'll be able to see a little bit better when we zoom in. Yeah, those are all lots of points, and those are all going to scatter when we are kind of building our little setup here. And I have this light up here, and what I'm doing is I'm basically saying, like, take all of those points and move them to this point. So there's like a bajillion points scrunched into here now, right? You can see. And then I'm giving it a normal attribute where it's basically saying, like, you know, point to the direction of where you were before. So like down here, I've moved all these points down here, and you can see I'm kind of creating that normal attribute to kind of basically be like my spotlight shape. And I did a second one over here, and then I just kind of merged them. But the other thing is that I kind of played a little bit with the idea of doing like a point jitter on these to get kind of a more soft fall off on my light. It didn't work super well, but yeah, actually, it kind of does work well. You can see on the shadow, I'm basically getting a soft fall off because I'm increasing the radius of my light now. And it's kind of awkward that it's like a cube-shaped light. But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. But since we're going for kind of a retro vibe, there wouldn't really be a legit, like, calculated soft fall off like this, so I decided to not use it. But it's there if you want to play with it. Yeah, I rayed those onto the character using the normal project rays method. I also brought in the attribute from the hits. It was much cheaper to get the color is of the prim that it's hitting. You know, that was much quicker and more efficient than, and you can see this basically, like, for me, this basically runs in real time. Or it runs really fast. It definitely is not perfectly real time, but it's, you know, like, fast enough that I could animate like this in theory. And so then what I do is I create this cam shadow attribute, and that goes down over to here and transfers onto these points that I'm actually shooting out. I'm taking this grid, I'm giving it a color, I'm turning it into points, and they're super evenly spaced, and then I'm moving that to where the camera is, kind of, or I'm actually not quite moving to where the camera is. I'm positioning it where it needs to be relative to the camera when the camera's at the origin, and then I'm adding that camera transform. So you can see it's going to move around. I'm also grabbing the camera position in here and using that to sort of set the normal direction for the way that the rays should shoot out, using basically the same setup as last time with the ray sop. So then these shoot onto here, and you can see it kind of creates this interesting, like, silhouette outline with the remaining points, which I want to get rid of later, so I have them create a point group of when they're hitting something, and then it will delete not that over here later. But yeah, then we go from there into my setup here, and you can play with that fake GI blending. This actually isn't going to work so well now since the point render mode not set to disks like I did before. So I'll do that, and I'll go back down here, and yeah, now you can see again, I can blend this, or I can choose like how much this guy's blurring or how many neighbors it's using, but kind of helps like sort of soften up the look a little bit. And then what I'm doing basically is just copying the points back on to where they were before. But since I deleted a bunch with that ray hit group, I needed to copy that group back onto this initial thing over here. And then now we got our setup with it just rendering in front of the plane. So that is pretty sweet. And again, that's pretty much it. A few other fun things in here you could mess with. I did do the text over here as well, which I just kind of merge in at the end, and I do the same setup with very simply. I did kind of mess around with the idea of, like, when it's rendering in particle space, maybe like doing some kind of like particle simulation on it. I didn't get anything that interesting with it, but I could see a lot of different ways you could get really cool, super custom stylized looks here. Like, for example, if we like use a connect adjacent pieces node here, and I set that to adjacent points, and I think I have to increase the search radius a bit, and then maybe lower the number of points that I want it to grab. But yeah, it'll basically create these kind of interesting patterns of just like points that are making lines out of the nearest points. You could definitely do really interesting things here with stuff like the find shortest path or other stuff. I played with the idea of also like connecting points when setting the position to the color attribute, and then doing the connect the points and then moving them back, but it wasn't giving me that great of results. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole setup. The only other thing is that you'll find I just did a really basic setup in stage context to render it if you want. I ended up sticking with using the OpenGL renderer instead, which was super fast, and you know, it gave me the look that I wanted, and you know, didn't have any noise from the path tracing. And then in the cops context over here, there's an image network where I was messing with some kind of like retro compositing ideas and stuff. And I think you can see, yeah, I did like some fun stuff with like the quantize node, which you can use to get some cool retro looks, and the glow, and combining things in different ways. But yeah, it made, I felt like I had a lot of control over this really custom stylized look that I was going for, and it's a lot of fun to make. So I hope this is helpful for you, and yeah, if you make anything with this, definitely let me know. But yeah, please go grab the file up on the Patreon and let me know what you think. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll catch you again real soon.